get a lot of stuff. Just
That's all right. I just need a chair now.
Wow, I broadcast and we have 22 attendants. No time like the present.
Okay. So we're broadcast now. Is that how this happens? We're live on some kind of website?
Broadcast means it opens to everyone. Before I do that, it's just open to me and you guys.
Okay. So when we start the meeting, you're open to everybody?
Yeah. Yep, okay. We're open and recording at this point.
Okay, good. So here we are. We're starting the DRB meeting for August 18th, Burlington Development Review Board. I'm just going to hop right into the agenda. We have one change to the agenda. Is that right, Scott? That Pearl Street they've withdrawn their application?
273 Pearl Street PUD has not withdrawn, but it needs to be deferred. We don't have a date certain. Basically, Design Advisory Board took longer than anticipated, so we'll have to reschedule it.
So do we have to open it as a public hearing to do that?
No.
What was that? Yes?
I said no. We're going to have to rewarn it from scratch anyhow.
Okay. So, and then we have communications. We have communications on 266 Green City Park Road, right? And they're posted online at this point.
Everything I've received is posted online.
Including that last VHB memo that you sent out today?
VHB, and the latest item I got was a note from DPW, and that's been posted.
Okay. Okay, so then we'll go minutes. Are the minutes from last meeting? Are they in here?
The minutes from the August 4th meeting are online with the August 4th packet, the draft.
Okay. Okay, so they've been down there. And we will take a look at them. With that, I guess we'll go to our first item is 273 Pearl Street. I guess I should ask if anybody is here to speak on that application.
If you are, raise your hand with the raise your hand function in Zoom. If you're dial-in, you can do that by pressing *9. I don't see anyone raising their hand,
Okay.
Brad.
So we're going to defer 273 Pearl Street to another agenda to be determined. Is that true?
You know, I'm going to change my mind on you, Brad. Mary's not here tonight. She's managing it, but I think we're aiming for September 15.
Okay.
So I think no harm, no foul if you guys act to defer to the 15th. If we have to adjust it again, we can.
Okay, can I have a motion to defer this to September 15th? From somebody?
I can do that.
Okay,
On 20-0717 CH/MA 273 Pearl Street, I move that we defer this matter to the September 15th meeting.
second?
I'll second that.
Bobby seconds it. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
AJ? Okay. All in favor, yes. 2, 4, 6 in favor of that. Okay, the next item we have is 266 Queen City Park Road. I am sure we have public and the applicant here for that. So can I start by saying, and people can hear me, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody who intends to testify or speak on 266 Queen City Park Road, can you raise your right hand and swear that you will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pain and penalty of perjury? I'm assuming that when people come to actually speak tonight, that's an affirmation of that statement. Okay. And this is really the third meeting on this project, I believe. And we had further information on daytime traffic events and also on noise follow-up from last hearing where we got further documentation. So I think that we're trying to focus on those issues at this point, and we would have the applicant speak first. Anything you want to add on that or respond to what the public had to say at the last hearing, and then we will hear from members of the public. So
Brad, I'm still working on enabling folks to talk. Burton sent me a list of a few folks.
Burton's going to be what?
Burton sent me a list of a few folks who are planning to talk. So I'm working on doing that right now.
I see Justin, Diane. Are you there, Justin?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and who is speaking first for you?
Brian Dunkiel is going to kick things off for us.
Okay. I see Brian's there. Are you there, Brian?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I was going to let Scott catch up, and once he says we're all good, I'll get going.
Okay. Yeah, the list changed around a little bit, and sometimes it doesn't have the right person. Jen Connolly. I have two more. So I don't see a Mark Alderson in the attendees list, Justin or Brian. I just see a Mark.
Okay. Mark's, why don't, if we need to get Mark in here, I will confirm that with you with a comment or something, Scott, but he's not a planned speaker for us.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, it gives
So
me an error when I go allow to talk. It says he's using an older version of Zoom.
Okay.
okay,
We can proceed without.
great. So this is Brian Dunkiel. I represent the applicant, Higher Ground and Burton Corporation. With me tonight, the primary speakers will be Justin Worthley of Burton, Alex Crothers of Higher Ground, Eddie Duncan, the RSG noise expert, and Jen Conley, the VHB traffic expert. We're going to try to be judicious with your time tonight, and we welcome questions. In order to try to narrow in on the issues, just at the outset, you heard many concerns by the CRZ at the last hearing and other people concerned about the project. But we're going to hone in on the project as proposed in the application and as conditioned. You're reviewing a conditional use permit application. And so a lot of what you heard about were concerns about an unconditioned proposed use, but we have a conditioned proposed use. And just as an example of that, under conditional use criteria 4, as an example, the VHB traffic impact study looks at the use, kind of optimizing or maximizing the use of traffic flowing through the transportation system during PM peak. But there's a proposed condition that says that large projects aren't going to actually be in conflict during PM peak. And so there's a condition proposed for the use that already mitigates those impacts out of what's actually the application before you. And so I want to kind of preface what you hear tonight with our effort to try to focus the issues on the application before you, not some other application, so that your questions, and we could really drill into as needed the issues with the application before you, not some other proposal. In order to do that, I think it would be helpful to look at some of the conditions on the project that staff has in their staff report. The applicant mostly aligns with those proposed conditions. We have a couple of issues that we'd like to bring to your attention with those proposed conditions. And I thought running through those would be a good exercise to have those conditions front and center in focus before we get into some of the technical details on traffic and noise. So is that an okay way for us to use our time?
It seems, but obviously part of our task is to understand whether the conditions put forth are the right conditions and whether there's sufficient conditions. So they may not be all the conditions that are part of this project.
Understood, but okay, let's at least get those conditions on the table. Okay. So Justin, would you mind pulling up the Quello memo from Friday? And then what I would ask you is, Scott has, in Scott's staff report, at the end of the staff report, where they always are the proposed conditions. And what I would ask us to first focus in on is condition 3. Scott, does Justin have the power to?
Yeah, I just enabled Justin to be able to
Okay.
share.
Thank you. All right. So, you know, we're mostly aligned with staff on condition 3. Um, uh, the essence of condition 3 is that the applicant will be required to do a noise assessment of the of 3, you know, kind of full capacity events that occur within right when the facility, or early on when the facility opens up. Our primary, the difference between the staff recommended proposed condition and our edits to it is we are attempting to make very clear what's expected of us with this study, so that there's just more clarity in the proposed condition. We work with Eddie Duncan on this, and I guess I would at this point defer to Eddie to see if there's anything that he could share that explains why this is helpful for him to understand what's expected in terms of designing the study.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so the purpose behind these conditions are to define the timing in which the events would occur, and also the areas in which the events would occur for post-construction monitoring. And so that's really critical, so that it's not you know, limited to necessarily one location, but not necessarily you know, all throughout Vermont. And so that's where it's talking about where it would take place, the same geographic area as the noise assessment, and then also the number of events. So we're looking at a full capacity event within the first 6 months. Excuse me, 3 full capacity events within this first 6 months, where, you know, a full capacity event is where we would anticipate higher projected sound levels, and then it also gives us you know, that a level that we can compare to see whether or not the facility is meeting the you know, required parameters or not. And so that's really the purpose behind this. And then in addition to that, you know, there's also the statement in there that allows for sorry, I just want to make sure I have that correct there. Yeah, so under item 4, that additional sound mitigation measures could be taken if needed, based off of this monitoring. And so, you know, ultimately the purpose is that even though we fully anticipate that the facility will perform within the required parameters, this condition allows for compliance measurements and a mechanism to reduce sound levels further should it be necessary.
And then Justin, if you could just scroll up for condition 4. Condition 4, again, Scott has condition 4, which we are aligned with. It just refers to the mitigation measures of RSG's April 20th report. What we're proposing is to be more precise with this condition on what those mitigation measures from the report are. And you know, we have confidence, and we've consulted with Eddie and others that with this will, you know, the facility will achieve as required, but we just wanted to be much more precise in the wording of the condition. The then scrolling down to, let's see, condition 5, we're on board with the staff's recommendation on condition 5. We have one request on this, and I'll try to keep this brief. We're asking for each of these conditions. These are the conditions that are going to live on with the use, that this phrase that's here up on the screen on condition 5 be included, that this condition that acknowledges the condition can be modified, but only with the approval of the DRB after a public hearing. For the lawyers on the board that are, all of whom are familiar with the Stowe Club Highlands case, the interest here is that we want these permit conditions to acknowledge that there's a balancing between flexibility and finality, and that because changed circumstances are definitely possible, particularly with a use like this, that there's the possibility that Burton Higher Ground go back and ask for the conditions to be modified. This is very similar to what happened with the Waterfront Park case, but that permit condition didn't have this allowance. And so unfortunately, that case had to go all the way up to the Vermont Supreme Court just to go through the kind of Stowe Club Highland type inquiry as to whether or not the permit condition could be modified at all, whether or not it was justified. And so we just request that flexibility versus finality be addressed right in the permit conditions themselves. Shifting gears now to permit condition 7, and if I'm not saying anything about the permit condition, it's because we're comfortable with the staff's report and how the permit condition is written there. And let's see, for this one, I think this one goes to, in part, some of the communications that came in this afternoon. Am I correct about that, Jen and Justin?
Yes.
Yeah, this is about daytime use. There's a memo that Susan Molzon submitted from DPW today, which we've had some back and forth with DPW about daytime use, and Susan confirmed today that DPW does not have any concerns around the daytime use as outlined. Capacity of up to 300 people within there's hours restrictions as well.
Great. And so now I just want to, because I think it's going to be very important to our discussion about the traffic impacts. I didn't mean to just gloss over the condition. Which one is it? Sorry, the condition that has the limitations on the timing of the events, condition 5, excuse me, for that delay. So this condition limits the number of attendees for daytime use, but then for the events, for other events, it goes to, and this is particularly for the larger events, it has strict time limitations on when those could occur. And again, the purpose of those time limitations is to avoid conflict with PM peak. And this is something that was worked through with the applicant's expert, and DPW. So I guess with that background on the conditions, I guess now what probably makes the most sense is to turn to the traffic and noise issues. And if it's okay with you, we would start with traffic.
Okay.
Do you have a preference one way or the other?
No, I mean, a lot of what you've been talking about is traffic, so.
Great. Okay. So Jen,
Unless, Brian, just for a second, unless the board has any questions for Brian at this point, what he said so far. No, okay.
great, thank you.
Continue, Brian.
So you received, some communications from Jen of VHB on Friday, looking at a couple of issues on traffic, and then there were communications today from DPW. Feel free to ask questions about any of it of Jen. I'm going to ask her not to repeat all of that because, again, we want to keep this moving. So Jen, I'll turn it over to you now.
Sure. I'm obviously not going to get into great detail, but just want to go over with you very briefly. As I think you know, the TIS followed standard industry practice and was reviewed by DPW as well as the city's transportation consultant, who confirmed they were completed appropriately. And I just want to make that point, and that was the point of our memo I believe you received on Friday, that although there have been concerns raised, the review and the conditions proposed by the DPW do address a number of those concerns. The limiting of hours, as Brian has already mentioned, to ensure that there isn't an overlap in the PM peak hour really ensures that the delay increases that are included in that study don't occur, because it really eliminates that overlapping of the commuter peak hour with Burton traffic, or Burton traffic with the commuter peak hour. It takes that performing arts use, which is the higher generator, out of that critical PM peak hour, which I know was a concern. Why that's important to mention is because some of the results from the traffic study were being referred to and there were concerns about them, but that presents an overly conservative case that analyzes that overlap occurring. It does not analyze this conditioned situation that eliminates that overlap. So I just want to make sure that the board is clear on that what was presented in the traffic study is an extremely conservative case that assumes the two uses would overlap. In addition, as far as some of the areas of concern, the monitoring and traffic improvements condition at Home and Pine really is there to ensure that although that level of impact is quite unlikely, that it would be addressed if that were to occur. So although it's already conditioned that there isn't overlap, in the event something happened and the impact was more intense, that there is this fail-safe, that there will be monitoring at that location and potential improvements identified at that location. And even after the Champlain Parkway is built, there could be a concern at Home and Champlain Parkway. And if that were to occur, a similar condition exists. Now we know, based on recent counts that have been done in the area, that traffic has not grown at the level that was assumed in the Champlain Parkway study. So as a result, it's even less likely that it will reach the delay levels identified in the TIS, because that did use Champlain Parkway projections and overlapped the Burton and performing arts use on top of that. So it's a very conservative condition. But again, if that level of delay was reached, there is this other condition that would protect the city and provide them with the mechanism to monitor and to propose improvements at that location. Now, in addition, there were a couple of other items that have been raised, and there was a concern about the one-lane bridge. And we were asked, there was also a concern raised by the city's transportation consultant. They reviewed the analysis. We worked together to make sure we used the right factors, and we did a simulation to make sure that when either during the PM peak hour with the overlap or at the end of an event, that traffic could get processed over that one-lane bridge. And so that is something that, again, was raised as a technical concern, was addressed, was reviewed on behalf of the city, and they were in concurrence with our analysis that shows that it will operate with minimal delays. The other issue, and I believe Brian mentioned, is this midday peak question. One of the issues is, as we know right now, traffic isn't necessarily doing what traffic has done in past years, so it's a difficult time to collect information about midday traffic. We took a look at some sources that are available, and even recent counts at Home and Pine show us that the hours immediately adjacent to the peak hour, traffic drops off by about 10%. And data that was available on what was Industrial Parkway at the time, now Queen City Park Road, traffic at the midday is at least 25% lower than traffic in the evening peak. And that is why DPW has agreed with our analysis that says a 300-person event, once you take into account that folks will carpool and that there are a number of routes to and from the site, the level of traffic added at midday will still be significantly less than during the PM peak hour and significantly less delay than was presented in the report. So that was why they were in concurrence that the issue there during the midday is not going to be something for a 300-person event that needs to be worried about. Finally, I know that there was another question raised today in some correspondence about Home Avenue in general. And really, I think, through the items I've already addressed, between making sure that there isn't the overlap between the uses in the commuter peak hour, as well as monitoring on Home Avenue before the Champlain Parkway comes in, as well as after the Champlain Parkway comes in, provide the city with that protection that if those delay levels were met, that there is an opportunity for transportation infrastructure at those locations.
I have a question for you, Jennifer.
Yes.
Just in general, we're talking about this 300-person daytime event.
Yes.
The position of Burton is that's happening now.
Correct.
And so, if I'm understanding correctly, it's still just one 300-person event. It's not, so that event, whether it occurs at this Performing Arts Center or at Burton's offices, it's one event. It's not
correct.
So
it is one event, and it is not really new traffic if you consider it that way. It's that the current site has space that allows for up to a 299-person event, and they want to still be able to host that type of event in a different piece of the development, basically.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yes.
So I have a couple of questions for you, Jennifer.
Certainly.
I think you were on and heard the presentation of the neighbors. And, part of what I'm looking for is an actual response to some of their concerns. Mm-hmm. The one I'd like your comment on is the concerns about traffic at Home and Pine at the end of an event. It seems, I'd just like your comment on that. What will Certainly. It be like at 1 a.m. at Home and Pine?
Similar to the question.
How many cars will go through that intersection under your analysis?
Mm-hmm. Currently, part of the issue is we're not sure how the traffic will end up distributing. Currently, if
distributing on the way out.
On the way out. So I can make assumptions, which I have, by looking at which way Google sends me at 11 or 12 or 1 in the morning. And I can tell you that typically Google will send you over the 1-lane bridge as you're leaving currently. Now, again, once a number of cars do that, some will instead go the other way. It'll end up balancing out, because if I look at my handheld, it will direct me one way or the other based on less delay. So even if we consider that the traffic that is destined, the traffic that's in question is what is destined to Interstate 89 ultimately, and which way it would choose to go, because folks headed to the north in general will head up to the north and they will go through Home and Pine. And people who are going to the south will take the 1-lane bridge and head to Point South on Route 7. So it's really that who is headed to the east to reach the interstate. And those folks, it is likely it will balance out to be about half and half which will result in about half of that site traffic going each direction, because truly the distribution based on current higher ground patrons results in a very even balance to the north and south, and then about 50% of the traffic headed to the east. So if we take that and we drill that down, what we're talking about is for a 1,500 person event and we have 500 cars, then we end up with, because 1,500 with 3 people per car comes down to 500 cars, really about half of that will go kind of in each direction. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, AJ.
Unmuted. 250. Sorry, I was
Correct.
trying to use the space bar technique, which is you can unmute.
And so the end result, go ahead.
Do you have an analysis for what the levels of service are at that point?
I do. So I did an analysis when this question came up, and because there is so little conflicting traffic on the other stop controlled approaches, again, I didn't recount it, but I looked at historic data and I looked at what the distribution was over the course of the day. And the volumes are so low at that intersection, for the most part, as higher ground traffic pulls up to the stop sign, it will be very rare that there will be someone on another approach. So they will pull up, hesitate, look both ways, and proceed through. It's going to be very rare that there is a conflicting vehicle. Now, of course, there's a little traffic at that time, but overall at the intersection, it's less than 100 vehicles. So 100 vehicles in an hour is very well spread out. And for the most part, as they pull up to the intersection, they also will be able to proceed through.
And then Jen, just so there's no ambiguity about it, just pulling this into the conditional use standard for the traffic criteria, which is whether the transportation system is capable of handling this amount of traffic as expected at this time. Do you have any doubt about the capability of that intersection to handle this?
No, not at all, because the traffic volumes are significantly higher during the weekday PM peak hour. Then the addition of the 250 higher ground patrons added to about the 100 vehicles that are in the baseline. That's only 350 vehicles. And currently Home and Pine, almost every approach has volumes higher than 350 in that PM peak hour. So it will be a small fraction of the current volume during that critical PM peak.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so just sort of on the same vein as AJ's question about some of the comments that were made at the last hearing, there was a comment raised, and I'm hoping that you can address, sort of built into your assumptions, there is at least in part the assumption that the Champlain Parkway will be completed. And I think there was concern from neighbors that what happens if the Champlain Parkway is not completed, what sort of interim measures will be put in place to ensure that they don't see the increase in traffic that may result if the parkway is not completed.
Well, unfortunately, that was a little bit of a misrepresentation of what was included in the traffic study, because we were scoped by DPW and by the peer review consultant to look at a condition without the Champlain Parkway and a condition with the Champlain Parkway. And although I know that there is an infamous quote out there that the project can't work without the Champlain Parkway, our analysis was very specific for both cases because we didn't know how that timeline was going to play out. So the conditions that were proposed take into account, as I said, the problem location that was identified as a potential issue in the commuter PM peak hour was Home and Pine without the Champlain Parkway. In the future, with the Champlain Parkway, that concern goes away, and there's another concern. So you'll see in the proposed conditions, they analyzed both, we analyzed both situations, they reviewed both situations, and the conditions were developed to address the concerns that were identified in the traffic study for each condition without the Champlain Parkway and with the Champlain Parkway.
Yeah, Ravi?
Any other questions on traffic?
I think Ravi has a question.
Yeah, so I've just, out of curiosity, I have like multiple questions on this. So were vehicle miles traveled taken into consideration? Because I'm basing this assumption on the majority of patrons being within a 10-mile radius. Would that be a fair assumption?
That is not a fair assumption for the higher ground traffic, actually quite the opposite. The higher ground visitors who are currently going to the South Burlington site for higher ground do come from all over. And we were able to get that by tracking zip codes associated with credit card receipts for ticket purchases. So we were able to trace. Now there is certainly a population that comes right from Burlington, but there is a population that comes from further afield along I-89 as well, which is why our distribution really goes in a bunch of different directions.
Got it. So I think my second part of my question was, you probably made it moot, because I was wondering if improving the roadway to a complete street that would improve bicycle transit circulation, would that lower trip ends potentially and improve the level of service of the intersection?
Not in case of most of the higher ground patrons, no.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Any other traffic related questions from the board at this point? Okay. I guess I'm going to ask one other question just to satisfy myself. So there was some discussion that the number is 2.5 people per vehicle, not 3, I think. It was a recommendation from the city, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm happy to clarify that. I think the city believed in, and there is an argument that you might get as many people per car. Sorry?
You were breaking up. Can you say
Oh,
that?
I'm sorry. There was some argument made, and it does make sense that during a daytime smaller event, that it is quite likely that it would have a lower vehicle occupancy than an evening event where you might have more younger people piling into a car and going together. So it really was for that midday analysis to provide a more conservative analysis of what really could happen. We looked at that lower vehicle occupancy rate.
Okay, so then you're splitting these vehicles, these 250 cars equally for whatever, so 125 cars heading to the Home and Pine intersection in Mass. Is that really the same thing as 125 cars in an hour going through that intersection?
No, good catch. That is true. And so one of the things we look at is whether traffic is spread equally over the course of an hour or whether it is more heavily concentrated. And in this case, we thought that it was quite likely there'll be some metering as people are leaving the driveways, but it will not take a full hour to empty that lot. So what I looked at is what's called a peak hour factor of 0.5, which says most of my traffic will actually leave in half of an hour.
Right, so doesn't that change the queuing at that intersection?
It certainly does. And so in my analysis, I did take that into account. I did apply that peak hour factor into the analysis and then looked at still the delay in the queuing that was provided. And although it does increase it more than if it was spread over the hour, it still is so much lower than what is currently occurring there on every single approach at that intersection in the commuter peak hour.
So if in that half hour you have 125 cars trying to get through that intersection, will they get through that intersection in a half an hour?
Most definitely. Because there's hardly anyone else coming in the other directions. When you really look at the fact that over 400 cars get through the intersection on every single approach of that intersection during the commuter peak hour, and they have to wait for each other and yield to each other with a smaller number on only one approach and very little conflicting traffic, there's very little delay involved.
And no traffic control is part of the proposal here, right? This is just let it come out as it comes out. There's nobody directing traffic.
No one at Home and Pine, no.
Just at the lot itself, maybe.
There will be some folks at the lot, but it's not specifically traffic control. I mean, truly, traffic will meter itself by the different merges in the parking lot, and as they pull out onto Queen City Park Road, there will be some metering and spreading of traffic that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Brian, what's next here?
If it's okay with the board members, we'll now turn to noise and Eddie Duncan.
Okay.
And again, I guess the preface, there's been a lot of communication. There were a lot of comments last week or 2 weeks ago, a lot of communication about noise. Eddie is going to, focus his comments on the issues as they pertain to this project as proposed, as conditioned. There's some, I guess there's some technical issues that Eddie's going to address, and then there's some legal issues that have been raised. So I'm going to pop in every now and then as we work through the noise issues, if that's okay.
Thank you.
And so with that, I'll turn it over to Eddie.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I just briefly want to touch on the conditions that Brian mentioned earlier and how noise would be managed from the facility. And then I want to touch on 2 or 3 specific issues that have been either brought up in previous hearings or through some of the reviews of the noise study by some other consultants. So the first thing I want to mention are the conditions that Brian spoke to earlier, condition 3 and post-construction monitoring, and that really being there to determine whether or not there is compliance with the stated parameters, and then provide a mechanism for further reducing sound levels should it be necessary. We fully expect that the facility will perform within the stated parameters, but should that not be the case, there's a mechanism there to address it. Condition 4 speaks directly to the transmission loss of the building itself to contain music, and so it also treats the construction discussed in the noise assessment as a minimum design requirement. So while it specifies the specific construction, the condition is stated such that it could be equal to or better than what is proposed in the or discussed in the noise assessment. In addition to these conditions, the facility will have the operational management plan that we talked about at some previous hearings, and that management plan addresses both pre-concert queuing, it prohibits tailgating, and also a managed departure as those elements relate to noise. And so I'm not going to go into details on those, but I just wanted to reference those as key elements in managing noise from the facility. Now I'd like to turn to a few specific topics that were brought up previously. And so first, I think we had some feedback and concern about noise from the outdoor lounge area. So I'll address that, and then we'll talk about briefly about LMAX, which is a sound level metric, and then we'll turn to the noise ordinance. I apologize, I got a train going by here, so hopefully that doesn't interrupt me. But so for the outdoor lounge area, I first want to mention that the plans for the building include a 10-foot high screening around the outdoor lounge area. That screening was not taken into account in the noise assessment. It's not mentioned in the noise assessment, and that element could further reduce sound from the outdoor lounge area beyond what was accounted for in the noise assessment. So I just wanted to point that out.
Would the construction of that barrier match the sound mitigation recommendations for construction that are part of the building?
No, so for a barrier doesn't have to have the same specifications like what we provided in the noise assessment for the building. And the reason for that is typically the limiting factor behind a barrier is the diffraction over the top edge of the noise barrier, not the actual material of the barrier. So the barrier would need to be something like 4 pounds per square foot and not have air gaps. That's the general specification that we're talking about. Ultimately, it's that height of that barrier as long as it has that design specification, it's the height of that barrier, that 10-foot height that really mitigates the sound because you want it to be above head height for people.
Is this subject to the same criteria of sound levels outside the facility that are measured at that 45 dBA as the building is?
Yes, yeah. So the sound level from the outdoor facility is subject to that 45.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm saying is that the screening was not taken into account in the
Mhm.
calculation of the sound levels that you have before you. And so it's an additional mitigation measure that will further reduce sound beyond what the levels that we've presented.
So this was an issue that was raised a couple times during the previous hearing. It was also raised in a letter from counsel for the CRZ uh, just before this hearing, and with an allegation that there was an error in Eddie's analysis. And I think the point is that there was no error in the analysis. And not only that, the analysis is extremely conservative because it analyzes the travel of sound from voices without any screening. But if you look at the project plans that are part of the application, the site plan, I think it's I could get you the reference if necessary, clearly depicts a 10-foot barrier around that area. And so then, Eddie, I guess the question is, with that barrier, in terms of voice traveling to a receptor, what would you anticipate the decibel level being by the time it gets to that receptor? Did you run those calculations?
I did, and the sound level. I would say that Mr. Tachi, the consultant for one of the residences, also suggested that the sound emissions from the outdoor lounge area could be higher in the assessment. So to run those calculations, we actually assumed that higher level. He assumed what's called a sound power level of 100 decibels, and so in assuming that sound power level of 100 decibels and the screening, the sound level at the worst case residential areas from the outdoor socialization would be 34 decibels, which is below the sound level that's being the total sound level that's being predicted. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yes, thank you.
I did want to point out, even though we used the recommended 100 decibels from Mr. Tachi's review, it wasn't clear from that review whether or not the values that he was proposing include outdoor music. He had provided a number of examples from other facilities that had outdoor areas, and it wasn't clear whether or not those number values included outdoor music. But to be clear, the proposed outdoor lounge for this project does not include outdoor music.
So now we'll shift gears into LMAX. There was some discussion about whether LMAX data was going to be included or was necessary to be included as part of this application. Eddie provided a supplemental memo to you that included LMAX data. There's been, I'll pause on this there. Let's get into the technical side of things, and then if law is needed, we'll get into that. But let's let the technical piece speak for itself.
Sure. So briefly, LMAX is just shorthand for maximum sound level, and LEQ would be essentially a shorthand for average sound level. And so the noise assessment, the actual noise report, used an hourly LEQ, or a maximum hourly average sound level, and it assumed that a hard rock concert was playing continuously for that hour, no breaks in music, no breaks in sets. So that's what that conservative assumption was, but there was feedback about LMAX, and so we provided additional information in the August 3rd memorandum about LMAX, and looked at using an LMAX of 106 decibels inside the building. So the average sound level that we had previously modeled was 99. and that was taken from the higher ground facility. But we then looked at, well, the maximum sound level from a Hard Rock concert at the higher ground facility, which was 106. And so we provided those numbers in that memo. And what you'll see is that even with those Lmax values, the sound level from music is still below 40 decibels. We understand that music is a concern, and it contains additional information beyond, what HVAC equipment includes. And so that was part of the purpose and the planning behind the mitigation that's planned for the building to contain that breakout music or that sound. And so, we were really shooting to keep music below 40 at any residence, and that is the case even using LMAX.
Good.
Any questions about LMAX? Just, it's been thrown around. This noise data and science can be complicated, so I don't want to rush past it.
Okay. And that's what's in your memo from Eddie from August 3rd, right?
Yes, from August 3rd. We discuss LMAX, I think, on page 7 and page 8 of that memorandum, 6, 7, and 8 of that memorandum. And I guess the last thing I would point out on that is, even using LMAX, the sound level from the music is still less than the other sources that are associated with the facility. So music is not the primary source of sound from the proposed facility. There's the rooftop mechanical equipment. The sound from the outdoor lounge area is even lower, and then there's vehicles accessing the parking lot during the concert.
And the
assumption, that's a great sorry.
I was just going to say, the assumption behind all this is the doors are closed when the music is happening, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and that there are double sets of doors to keep that barrier contained.
And that's in the plans.
Yes.
That are part of the application. But what Eddie was just getting at in terms of the amount of sound that actually will travel to receptors, and that the music isn't the dominant sound that when it reaches the receptors in the model, is actually a really good segue to the noise ordinance. And you received some correspondence about whether the noise ordinance applies to this proposal or not. I guess I'll preface this discussion with, we're providing you the evidence. We don't want to litigate the application of the noise ordinance to this project in front of the DRB. This is a noise ordinance that is reviewed, the exemption is something that involves a license that is under the jurisdiction of the city council. We don't think you should have to litigate and decide its application. We believe we are exempt because we will be getting a license, although I appreciate the creative lawyering that was presented in the letter that you received, I think Friday or earlier today. But nevertheless, we're providing you with the evidence that demonstrates that to the extent that there's standards in that ordinance, you have a basis to interpret that ordinance and apply the information concerning, or the evidence concerning, the expected noise from this project, and conclude that it is satisfactory. There are technical issues with regards to the noise ordinance that I think it's important to hear from Eddie on.
Sure. So yeah, I want to start by just noting that it's important to note that the purpose of the noise ordinance is to preserve the public health, safety, and welfare by prohibiting excessive and disturbing noise, and to prevent noise which is prolonged or unsuitable for the time and place. And so it's through that lens that the noise ordinance can be evaluated and interpreted. We did this by applying the World Health Organization guidelines and also guidelines from the American National Standard Institute that speak to compatibility of sonic environments with land uses. Those two documents speak to the same issues that are identified in the purpose of the noise ordinance, that is, preserving public health, safety, and welfare. And so those guidelines provide a quantitative basis for us to evaluate that purpose. Sorry, Brad, you look like you were about to ask a question, so I paused for a second. So as there are technical issues, I think that the topic of plainly audible has come up, and so CRZ's consultant and counsel have expressed concern that the project doesn't meet a plainly audible standard. There are technical issues with plainly audible standards, particularly if the terms are not defined by the ordinance, which in this case it's not. So for example, in one of the CRZ consultants' review of our study, they had equated plainly audible with detectable. And so detectable, there are lots of sounds that are detectable that are not audible by the human ear. And in addition to that, the conditions for audibility can vary greatly. So without a definition within the ordinance, the plainly audible clause should really be interpreted within the context of the purpose of the ordinance, which is what we already did or discussed within the noise assessment. That is, looking at those guidelines.
And then Eddie, with regards to the information in your memo that showed where the noise level from music fits within all the other sources of noise coming from the proposed use, as I read the noise ordinance, it only applies to music, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So the
plainly audible piece.
The plainly audible
Yeah.
clause only applies to music, and music, as you pointed out, is not the what produces the highest level from the facility, or frankly from some other sources in the area.
Great. So let's see. I guess, on the noise ordinance and plainly audible, the Vermont Supreme Court has looked at noise ordinances without a specific quantified decibel level included in the criteria, and has upheld noise ordinances like the city of Burlington's. However, in the cases where it found that those types of noise ordinances with that qualitative criteria can be upheld, they've looked at it the way Eddie is suggesting, which is in the overall context of the purpose of the ordinance. I'd refer you to the discussion in the Inri LaBerge NOV case, 203 Vermont 98, and there, the Supreme Court, clearly upheld a qualitative ordinance, but said we need to look at it in context of purpose, and that's exactly what Eddie is suggesting you do here, which is exactly why the WHO standards are so useful in making sense to all this. To the extent that courts in other jurisdictions have thrown out noise ordinances like this, it's been when it was applied without further criteria or definition. I'll point out that the CRZ's noise experts are asking the DRB to read definitions into the ordinance that don't exist. And all of our analysis and all of Eddie's suggestions here are grounded squarely in the ordinance itself. The last point I'd make on the noise ordinance is, again, the DRB's job is not to apply prospectively a noise ordinance to a use that hasn't even started yet. The DRB's role is to apply the conditional use criteria of the zoning ordinance. And the conditional use criteria of the zoning ordinance asks you to look at whether there's a likely undue adverse effect. And the applicant's position is that we've given you ample evidence that demonstrates that even applying this standard of music that's contained in the noise ordinance, there will not be an undue adverse impact on criterion 6.
Okay. I know that there's public that wants to speak too, and so we want to be able to move on to that too. Are there other aspects of this, Brian, that you were presenting with that? I think that was the range of things you wanted to talk about. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, if I have some comments prepared with regards to the request for additional data. I don't want to take up your time in that. You know, I think that you have you know, a extremely sound and credible noise study in front of you. If that's not a concern, I won't take time on that. In addition to traffic and noise, we thought it was important to just rebut some of the comments that were raised on public safety and on there was correspondence with regard to the public utilities and wastewater permit, the criteria that gets at those issues. I don't want to take your time if you're comfortable with the application and the information in front of you, but I do have.
Keenan has a question. Let me see what Keenan, what are you asking here?
Yeah, so this is specifically, and I guess this kind of ties into public safety, but the question that I had is because it came up, I had originally asked this question in July, and then it came up at the public hearing. But I know you folks have, so in your operational management plan, you've talked about, and we had a heard presentation on the concentric circle protection that you folks are going to utilize in sort of minimizing tailgating and making sure that you're preventing folks from, you know, leaving the venue intoxicated. But one of the concerns that some of the neighbors expressed at the last hearing was, when it comes to tailgating, I get that you have this plan for folks sort of in the near vicinity of the area. What are you going to do to sort of help mitigate some of the tailgating that might occur in sort of the outer neighborhoods near the project?
I'll defer to Justin and Alex in a second, but there's provisions in the OMP that call for the applicant to work with the city of South Burlington and the city of Burlington on signage issues. So that could be part of the remedy there. What I could say is that we're responsible for the proposed use that occurs on this property. I also think that's your jurisdiction. You know, with regards to the Development Review Board. And, you know, the OMP covers the management of that.
Brian, I just not to interrupt, but just follow up on Keenan's thing. I think when we get into a conditional use, the issues go beyond the property. And so there are issues, like we talk about traffic away. I think Keenan's question of what happens off-site with these 1,500 people, that's part of the concern. That's the concern the neighbors express. And that's part of, I guess, our expectation that Higher Ground will be addressing that.
So as I said, the OMP has provision to work with the cities on signage issues with regards to no parking and issues related to that. So that's part of the OMP already. I want to turn it over to Justin or Alex.
Well, I'll jump in. This is Justin from Burton. I'll jump in and then maybe ask Alex to make some comments too. I think you know, one of the benefits of this proposal that we have is that Higher Ground's been operating a very similar size venue in a different location across town for many years. The capacity at the other location is on 2 stages, over 1,100 people, and there's simply not. It's simply not a come early, stay late, hang out, tailgate environment. It's really people drive to a show. There's actually going to be significantly more parking on the Burton location proportional to the current higher ground location. So we're not going to have the issue of people having to spill out and park in other places. And it's a concert venue that, you know, it's not going to be a place to come and have a party outside. We're going to have really clear rules around that. We've had conversations with the city of Burlington and the city of South Burlington about pre-event coordination. That's part of the operational management plan. That's part of the existing practice that's been happening for higher ground in the current location, and that would continue. So if there's a show that, you know, there's any expectation that there may be some more rowdy activity, there'd be a plan put together in advance, and really strong track record of that happening. Alex or Mark, anything else you would add to that comment?
You know, so basically, at this point, like I said, I'm getting a little anxious that this is our third hearing, and I know that there's some public that want to speak on this. So I'm going to see if the board members have more questions for the applicant at this point. I think you can come back after the public speaks if there's specific criteria to follow up on.
Yeah,
we appreciate that, and we're happy to answer any other questions. Although, Mr. Chair, the CRZ and the public spoke for an hour and a half at the last hearing.
Yeah, this is your third and a half hour. So hold on a second. We've heard a lot, and we very much appreciate the thorough presentation. And I know how long CRZ spoke, and they wanted to speak a lot longer. So, you know, this is now going into hour 4 of your presentation. We appreciate the thoroughness, but I think we're very concerned about getting public comment on stuff that you guys submitted in the last couple of days. We're trying to be as open as we can, but, you know, we're going into hour 4 of your presentation and hour 7 of this, which I think is getting to the point where we'd like to focus on you answering board questions concisely. We've read everything that's been presented, and, you know, we know this could go on, and we're going to be very tight with the public as well here. So I would say that I think the question is, does the board have any more questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I see nobody's having questions. So I think it is an opportunity. Scott?
I'm sorry to interrupt. In light of the time and our next applicant meeting at 7, Housing Board of Review, does it make sense to recess this at this point, take care of Spruce Street, and then continue after Spruce Street is done? Or do you want to go ahead as is?
Oh, you mean to adjourn this hearing for half an hour right now?
Yeah, recess it for whatever, 30 minutes, and then resume it. Your call.
How does the board feel? I mean, I think at this point, continuing seems to me to be a good thing. How's the board feel about this?
I'd like to just keep moving along.
Yeah, I think so. I think if we can have the public comment at this point, and then we'll see if there's any reason to have the applicant come back after that.
Yeah, and I think the Spruce Street application is pretty tight. Unless the applicant has concerns with the staff report, I'm not sure there's a lot for us to address in there, Scott.
Okay, I'm just pointing out he needs to go to another meeting at 7.
Oh, the applicant does.
Yeah, the applicant does.
Well, maybe we should, if that's the case, just to accommodate that applicant, maybe we will adjourn this.
Recess it.
Recess it.
Thank you. Recess the meeting for, I think it's just going to be 15 minutes, and then after which we will have the public, and we'll try to be fairly limited. We've got a couple of specific issues here about daytime operation and noise that we've been hearing additional testimony on, and have the public comment on those things. So saying that, we'll take a recess on this application and go to the next one, which is, here it is, 119 Spruce Street. I take it the applicant is here.
Yes, just give me a second.
And is there anybody besides the applicant that wants to speak on 119 Spruce Street?
So I know I see a number of hands, but some of them were left over from Barton. So I'm gonna lower all the hands and try this again. Raise your hand if you wish to speak for Spruce. Okay, good. So I'm gonna allow the applicant to talk, Chris Camney. And then we can get into public comment.
Is there anybody else in the public who's speaking, Scott, besides Chris?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I see 4 others, or 3 others, including Bill. I'm gonna guess maybe that's Bill Ward.
Okay, so I'm going to ask anybody who's going to speak on 119 Spruce Street to raise your right hand and swear that you tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under pain and penalty of perjury. So, Chris, there's an application.
Okay, so applicant can speak and the members of the public who raise their hand can speak as well.
Okay.
Chris, go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see me?
No.
Is that something that is part of the Zoom, or are you just, I'm trying to clear up the confusion. So I can see 9 board members.
Yeah.
No, we haven't authorized your video.
What's that? I see. Okay, so if you don't authorize my video, then I don't appear on the screen. So all that's being recorded is my voice.
Right, and Chris, I can show your site plan or building elevations if you want.
Okay, so I guess that's the difficult part is without a visual, I guess Scott is really the one that has to make the visual presentation. So I think the application's pretty simple. There was a previous zoning application by the neighbor at a time that I was really quite busy. He's doing a project next door on 129 Spruce Street. It's an addition of a garage and a workshop. And we agreed to remove the common driveway on the east side of 119 Spruce and the west side of 129 Spruce. That common driveway went to the backyard where there was a tremendous amount of pavement in each backyard and a garage in each backyard. So his applications removed the driveway and one of the garages. At the time, I thought it removed both of the garages because why would you remove the driveway to a garage and not the garage? So I demolished the garage, and later I found that it was not permitted in that application. So I submitted this application to rectify the removal of that garage. So there are some pictures, and I'm believing the board has already read the reasons why the garage should be removed at this point.
Yeah, and Chris, so the staff report was fairly straightforward, but it was saying that the deficiencies had to do with the plans and details on what's being proposed.
There were two diagrams that Scott had requested, and those have been they've been replaced since that time.
So this drawing we're seeing now with the garage basically under the house is what is being proposed.
Correct. Not underneath the house, but adjacent to the ground level. So underneath the porch.
Okay. And is there? And is there, that's the only view you have of this proposal, right? Is this?
Well, there's a west view as well.
Yeah, there's the front, Brad. There's
Look at this.
south, and there was a new west elevation that was provided. I can pull up the revised western elevation.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay. Right. Okay. I missed it was on the bottom of the agenda.
Yeah, that's an odd spot. I must not have bumped it up.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's helpful. So it's a red stone wall on the side of that, Chris?
Correct. There's well, we're losing a couple things. There's a little bump out that used to be a, to put this in, I lose a little bump out of foundation that must have been a root cellar at one point. And it goes pretty deep, so it's on 3 sides. So that redstone will be recaptured. And then the bulkhead as well, which is an eyesore and a danger at best, will also be removed. If you look at the south elevation, it'll be covered by a deck. The reason those 2 things are not necessary, because if I build this, then you can drive in and comfortably walk in. There's already a door there at that level, so you can walk into the basement level. So suddenly that storage of basement can be accessed from the outside and the garage for bicycles and you know, common family activities, sleds and so on. So it lends itself to a nice design. And then recapturing all that redstone that's underground can be exposed and seen in that on the west side.
Okay, well, that seems fairly straightforward. Does the board have any questions for the applicant here? I understand there's a few neighbors that want to speak, Chris. Maybe we can take a minute and have them speak.
I've got some questions.
Okay.
Hi, Chris. This is Jeff Hand speaking. Your application doesn't have any photographs of the existing condition of that side of the house, or, you know, when I look on Google Maps, it's really impossible to see the house from the street or what's going on that side of the house right now.
Which side of the house are you speaking of?
I guess it's the west side of the house where you're proposing the garage.
Okay, there's not much there. It's been covered with aluminum siding. So if you look at the east elevation, there's the west.
Okay.
Hey,
and so are you burying? Is it going to be in ground? Do you need to dig further down into the ground to put that garage in?
Yeah, a little bit. Not much, but some. It's the way the elevation is now, they've kind of pushed the dirt against. There's kind of a mound, so okay. It's there's a hump. If you look at the I don't know if it shows. No, it won't show it in the north elevation, but the north elevation, if you're looking at the front of the house, from east to west, the ground, the earth is about the same level. It's been kind of leveled to, if you were to take a level of like a bubble level, it's kind of level. Spruce Street isn't level at all. It goes down on a slope. So as it approaches that brush that you see, the closest brush to you, that's where that kind of mound tapers. So if you were to just remove the mound, you're there.
Okay. And are there any other houses on that street or in that area that have that kind of buried below grade garage that really sits right in the facade of the house?
No, there isn't. But one street or 2 streets over on, is it Maple Street? There was somebody did a really nice, very, very similar, but they used marble. And they actually went right underneath the house. And it's the corner of Maple and Union.
The staff report speaks a little bit to the impact of removing the old garage, and it seems like there's general agreement that didn't add a lot of historic character. But Scott, I don't know if you can comment. This doesn't look to me, from the representations we've been given, to be very historically accurate, or to my eye, it sort of impacts the historical significance of the house itself to do what's being proposed here.
Well, my take is that the existing form, the building form, the historic structure remains intact. We're not altering the front facade or taking the front porch off. That all remains intact. This garage is being tucked under the porch, although the porch is being widened a few feet. It seems that insofar as front facade alterations are concerned, this one could actually work given its placement and the remaining integrity of the building. Right? I mean, if he was going to punch a hole through the left side of the ground floor on the front facade right now for a garage, we'd be having a very different conversation. Would say, no way.
Okay.
I'd like to add something to that too. You know, I could appreciate the historical value. Oops, something just happened to my screen here. Did I lose you guys?
No, we're still here, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, I just got a blank screen. Okay, so I'd like to add something here is that the house for at least since I've been in Burlington for the past 30 years has been neglected completely. It was for at least the last 60 years, from what I can best guess, it's been covered with aluminum siding. To put the aluminum siding on is they took off all the ornamental protruding trim around the windows. And then there was ornamental trim just below the soffit on each one of the soffit lines of the house. And they took their hammers, whoever installed this aluminum trim, and smashed it so it was flat. Now I'm taking some care to recreate, you know, using silhouettes. I've gone to the state historical to try to determine what it was and try to find pictures, but I'm using silhouettes and trying to rebuild that and recreate that. So if you're speaking of historical content, the garage isn't exact, nor was it built that way. However, I'm not changing the structure of the house. I'm actually trying to restore it and trying to put it to some beauty. Now the windows themselves.
Yeah, I think we got it, Chris, and good job on restoring that.
Okay, but please, you know, just one more thing is, you know, I took great care of measuring the windows and, you know, using an all wood clad exterior, recreation of the windows. At first, I wanted to go to restore them. However, somebody at some point thought it was a good idea to take all the blown glass out and replace it with 1/4-inch glass. Now, even the substantial weights, windows. Hello? Is that an angry neighbor?
No, Chris, I appreciate the effort you're making on it. I think that's not on point at the moment, and
the historical value of the house is on point, right? That's what was questioned.
And I think you answered it, Chris.
Yeah.
I think you answered quite well. I'd like to hear what the neighbors have to say, so then you can.
Brad, let me just ask one question.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, Brooks here. How are you?
Brooks, how are you?
Good, thanks. Is the house going to be used as a single family home, or are multiple families going to be in the home?
I was hoping to put in a brothel, but I couldn't find that in the zoning ordinance at all. So I think I'll just stick with a single family home.
Okay.
So, Scott, there are a few neighbors here.
Yes.
Is that how I see Ken and Bill and Stefan? Is that right?
Carolyn as well.
Oh, Caroline. So I see 4 people there. If you want to speak up, introduce yourself and let us know why you're speaking.
Okay, Carolyn.
You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. Hi. My name is Carolyn Hansen, and I live across the street from 119 Spruce Street. And I am concerned about the work that is going on there. I think that one of your board members has already mentioned that this proposed driveway and new garage may detract from the historical significance of the house. And I would agree with that. And if you have not driven by and seen this street, I would recommend that you do that. I mean, most of the houses, all of the houses really have garages that are behind the house, which is what 119 Spruce Street had. It had a old garage there, which unfortunately Chris tore down already. So you're not able to look at it and actually assess its historical significance. The day he did that, I walked over and said, "What's going on here? There's a permit to do the work at the neighbor's house." And I don't find Chris's assertion that he just got mixed up and was busy at all credible, because as he explained to me that day, he's a very experienced landlord, and he deals with the city quite often. He knows the permit process inside and out. And he told me that I was mistaken. He showed me his phone. He flashed up this permit. He said, "I have all the permits in place to do what I'm doing." And now he's saying that he realizes he didn't have the permit and that he was just mistaken. So there's two different explanations going on there. I'm really concerned because this is different than an application from someone who lives in the house and is going to live in the house. Chris has never lived in the house and is never going to live in the house. His plan is to fix this up and sell it. And the neighbors are very interested in making sure that the way it's fixed up is both safe and proper. And from what I've been able to observe day in and day out, I watch this house, leads me to be very concerned that either thing will be safe or proper. Just watching all the lead paint flying around that's being scraped off by the crew, the way they're going about removing all of the lead is quite concerning. So that's not directly relevant to what you're trying to decide. But I think if you look at the way the work's being done, you might realize that this project would take an enormous amount of oversight. And I don't think that the city has the time or the energy to spend the kind of oversight to make sure that what you're actually approving is the work that actually gets done, and that it's done in a safe way and meets all the requirements that the city has in place. Because what you've seen demonstrated so far is a complete disregard for the city's process by ripping down what may very well have been a historic structure. I can't possibly evaluate that for you now because it's gone. And from what I understood when I called the city was, oh, well, if somebody rips something down and they're not supposed to, then they just file for a permit and then they get a permit. And I'm sure it's more complicated than that, but that really concerned me because this just doesn't seem, I think with a project like this and with someone who I think has a track record of not being honest about what they're doing, then you really have to watch it so carefully and check every single thing. And I don't have the confidence that that would be done. And I don't think that what he is building is in keeping with the historic nature of the property. The driveway, the shared driveway that was there before was not an enormous amount of pavement. In fact, it was very much in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. And both places had garages back behind them. And you know, these are big, big changes to our neighborhood. It's going to affect the character, the saleability, the property values. And I think just the fact that you have so many neighbors that are really watching this project so carefully should give you some idea of the level of concern that we have.
Maybe we should hear from, does this board have any questions for Carolyn at this point? And I would like to hear from maybe Stefan. Do you want to go next?
Yes, I'd be happy to go next. I find the drawings that are...
Stefan, can just say your name and address?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Stefan Hilleman. I'm a concerned neighbor on the corner of Spruce and South Union.
Thank you.
So I look directly onto this property in winter anyway. So the drawings are inaccurate and could be considered a cartoon of what is actually going to be built. If we look at the west elevation, maybe we could go to that picture that is there, the photograph.
Oh, the photograph?
Yep. Yeah, this one right here. So next to the front porch, in the center of this picture, there is a one-story addition that has red stone underneath it. I think Chris referred to it as the root cellar. It projects 6 feet out from the remainder of the foundation of the house. Chris is proposing to add another 4 feet projection to the porch on the west side, which would mean that that red stone is not going to be continuous. It is going to have to be moved 4 feet out, closer to the photographer in this particular picture. So to get the 10-foot wide garage, that whole structure is not reflected even from the street view that showed the garage door earlier. It is not even on there, and it is not on any of the other drawings. And I, for the first time tonight, saw that red stone west-facing wall, which I think is a good idea. I was worried that the garage might just be lattice, as it is now on that porch, but I'm glad to see that there's going to be something more substantial to it. So that's my concern, that this very solid part of the house with the root cellar foundation underneath it, it's red stone. I don't know how far down it goes, whether it goes as far down as the other cellar, is not at all reflected in any of the drawings accurately. The other part that I don't understand is this driveway going to...
Should I address that now? Should I address that?
Wait until he's done, Chris.
Okay.
I have two other concerns, and it'll take less than a minute to discuss. The driveway, is it going to be level, sloping upward or downward? There are drainage issues that I'm worried about with that. And then finally, on this picture that you can see, there is a tree that is about 100 years old. It's a tulip tree. It's a beautiful specimen. And I'm told people come from all over to look at this particular tree. It's in front of the house. It was probably planted when the house was built. And as proposed, the retaining wall on the eastward side of the driveway, with all the construction that will go on, is going to be within 8 to 10 feet of the root of that tree. And that may have no bearing at all on the design review board's decision, but at least it's a concern I have that that tree, as it stands, a beautiful, healthy specimen, will suffer greatly from the construction that is proposed.
Okay. Any questions for this neighbor? I think Bill, I don't see a last name.
Bill Ward, he'll only speak.
Is that Bill Ward?
Yep, this is Director Bill Ward, and Mr. Chair, I was expecting to just speak if the neighbors hadn't been able to speak their concerns. I'd be happy to answer questions from the members of the DRB if they have any, but I don't have any additional comments at this time.
Okay. It seems that part of what's going on is we may be asking for more specific drawings and information on what's being proposed. But other than that, you wouldn't have anything to add at this point, Bill. Is that true?
No, I wanted to be here as a fact checker and answer questions. I have been to the property a few times, and I can say I've spoken with Carolyn and concur with some of the concerns that she had.
Okay. Thank you. Chris? So I think a lot of the comments we're getting really have concern about what.
Brad, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's one additional public, Ken Hample, looking to talk.
Oh, okay, sorry. Ken, didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. Ken, are you there?
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, Chris, it sounds like a lot of the issues have to do with exactly what's going to get built. And despite these are charming little drawings, it would be nice to have a specific drawing of what this is actually going to look like from the front, and having I think it's not unreasonable to think that the site plan would show something of how the driveway is actually going to be working, with the width of it, and something about the slope of it. Is that something that you could be providing at some point?
I'm not sure I want to. I could just leave the project as is if they're so concerned, and move on. It's really, you know, I want everybody listening to at least go and look at my restorations at 74 Overlake Park, 82 Overlake Park, 395 Manhattan Drive, 227 St. Paul Street, 233 St. Paul Street, 199 South Union Street. Okay. And you see that on many of these, and 230 Pine Street as well, we recreate the original roofs, slate roofs. Yeah. We put a tremendous amount of care in. We scrape the...
It's still, Chris, the issue is that part of the requirement of the zoning process is that we ask for these drawings.
Respectfully, Brad, you have interrupted me 4 times already, 5. So maybe you think what I'm saying is useless and not worthy. I disagree. I was talking about the windows before. The original blown glass in the windows was replaced with 1/4-inch thick glass, creating guillotines and hazards for children. I mean, a very dangerous situation. So if I could address at least some of these neighbors' concerns, the house is going to be substantially nicer than it has been in the past 60 years. What are you afraid of? The root cellar, the only technical thing is that Stefan brought up 2 technical issues, one with the tulip tree. So if you look at the tulip tree and the west elevation picture, you'll see that thing hangs over the house. It is a 100-year-old tree. It's a very dangerous 100-year-old tree. I'm having the city arborist look at it this week. It's a beautiful tree. I don't want to cut it down. However, would you want your children sleeping underneath that tree of that house? It will kill somebody. So we have to look at that and make assessment and choose life of a human over the life of a tree. So that's one technical issue that I'm having the arborist look at, and I will talk about any digging that's going to be around that.
Chris, I know you're not happy that I'm interrupting you, but I'm going to tell you that this application is a specific application, has to do with your garage and the expansion there.
Okay, and
that's where we would like more information.
Let me address Stefan's second question about the root cellar. That is the foundation that would be removed, and that is the stone that would recreate the west elevation support system for the porch, and that root what was above the root cellar is remaining right in place. That's a historic part of the house. There was another question about the historic part of the historic garage, whether that was historic or not. That was built in the 40s. There was nothing historical about it, and there was no value in it either. And Carolyn's incorrect when she says that green space hasn't been opened up. A green space is a factor of, you know, the percentage has gone down twice as much because of the amount of asphalt that's been removed from the backyards, both on 129 Spruce and 119 Spruce. So that's something the city moves forward towards as well, more, you know, proper green space and an efficient green style building. So the schematics and drawings that I provided should be sufficient.
Okay, I understand that you feel they should be sufficient.
So what are you looking for, Brad? Tell me what you want.
An accurate drawing, something that shows the garage, something that shows the dimensions in elevation, where the street is in plan on the site plan.
It does. Take a look at the elevation drawings.
I am happy to have us work with these and go to deliberative if that is what you want us to do. And we will deliberate, and maybe for the board that they will deem all these things sufficient.
Well, it sounds like you're gonna. It sounds like that's a threat, so you're gonna just disapprove it. So why don't you just tell me what you want and I'll do it? Not an argument, Brad. It's just this is just, you know, a bunch of politics. Somebody trying to stop me from making a building better and sell it. You know, it's just that, you know, these people have too much time on their hands or too much money or whatever it is.
Chris, I think I'm going to stop you. You can be mad at me. That's okay, unnecessary. And the fact is, Brad just can't tell you what he wants. If you want us to deliberate, we'll deliberate. We've heard from the neighbors. You've made your response. I think we can close the public hearing at this point. We'll take it under deliberative. We hear your perspective that you've provided us enough to make a decision, and we'll discuss that. So with that.
Let me confer with Scott.
Well, that's fine, but we're going to close the public hearing anyway.
I agree.
That's fine.
AJ
So
and Brad.
Close the public hearing.
So Mr. Hampel has raised his hand again. Do we want to try that again one more time?
Who has?
Ken Hampel. We tried to let him talk previously. Didn't hear anything.
Okay.
Okay. Ken, are you there? Ken?
So Ken, you're up.
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to close it.
I think we will close the public hearing. I thank everybody for participating, and we will be deliberating on this and follow up that way. Thank you. Okay.
Hey Brad, can I ask you a question real quick? This is Ryan.
Yeah.
There is another business item. I'm not sure if that would be able to taken care of before you go back to Burton and higher ground. It should be relatively quick, but
DRB bylaw amendment.
Yeah, what's that now?
I mean the DRB bylaw amendment.
Yeah, to remove a condition that was kind of.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, yes.
Can we take that up in deliberative?
Can we do that just quickly? This was, I guess, we want to remove a requirement that was on a condition of approval for 362 South Union Street. I don't know if the board had looked at that. I think I'm okay with that. I am going to be bold to make a motion here that on 20971 CACU 362 South Union Street, that we amend the conditions of approval to remove condition 4.
I'll second. I'll second.
Brooke seconds that. Any discussion on this?
Just for the record, I'm recused from this matter. This is Jeff Hand.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we have 3, 5, 6 in favor. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
Keeps this as an exciting meeting. Okay, so now we're back on Queen City Park Road, where I think, Scott, you must have a few people that might want to speak. And I am going to say that we have a lot of testimony from the applicant. We have further rebuttals from some testimony. So if we can keep it somewhat on point, it would be helpful. We have some traffic comments and some noise comments. Who do you have?
Can you remove me from the panel again?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm assuming people are still here.
Still have a number of folks. If you wish to speak on Burton, as a member of the public, raise your hand. And again, if you're on the phone, *9 would raise your hand. So first in line, it looks like we have Kyle Creason.
Okay, we're just gonna go. And Kyle, if you could introduce yourself and say where you live, that would be helpful.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
First thing, I want to thank you guys for your commitment to Burlington.
Where you live?
My name's Kyle Creason. I live on Home Avenue.
Thank you.
I have a family of 4. Thank you for your commitment. I know you're not getting great fanfare and riches for being here. You're serving Burlington well. I just wanted to comment and say, and just point out and put it on the record that during the traffic discussion, the estimated number of cars that you're using was 250 coming out of the show. You had said, using Jennifer's splitting the 50-50 difference, that 125 would go over the 1-lane bridge and 125 would go over home, where in reality, if you use the 2.5 person per car ratio, that equates to 600 cars, 300 coming out of the show, going across Queen City Parkway, 300 down Home Avenue. So that, I just wanted to clear that up because I think there were some incorrect numbers going on there.
You are right. And they want to use the 3 people per car.
They can use what they want, 500, 600, it's 250 either way, or 300. 125 cuts in half the number, and that is very disturbing if the discussions about traffic is what's happening there. So also, so 300 cars driving up Queen City Parkway, 300 up Home Avenue at midnight to 1 in the morning, right? Houses, children sleeping, families who live 30 feet from Home Avenue. So I just wanted to say that. Also, quickly, the argument that was made as to why that is acceptable was that it's not worse than the peak PM delay that happens. The rating on an A to F scale for the peak PM delay is an F. Also, that F is more than double the lower level of F. So really, it's an F, but it's so the argument was that 300 cars coming up through Home Avenue, it's acceptable because it's an F, and a very high, double the lower standard of an F at 1 in the morning. So I just wanted to bring that to attention, is that's what the argument that was being made is that it's okay because it's just the peak PM number, which is an F, which the reason the Champlain Parkway has been in the works to get built all this time is because an F is unacceptable. The F that represents the traffic right now on Home Avenue during the peak time for the volume versus the ratio that it can handle is 1.84, which puts it way over the acceptable limit for that type of street for the traffic. So I just wanted to make sure that got put out there because I think the numbers that were being thrown around were dramatically reduced. But I understand how that can happen. I don't think it was on purpose. I just wanted to, and I appreciate all of you guys' attention to this.
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, who do we have next up there?
We have Janice.
Okay.
Janice, you're up.
Yep, good evening. My name is Janice Ellis. I live at 161 Austin Drive in Burlington. I just have a couple of quick comments I'd like to make. I'm speaking tonight both as a member of Citizens for Responsible Zoning and as a concerned resident with a home that is in close proximity to the proposed Burton Higher Ground venue. As clearly noted in our presentations at the August 4th DRB meeting, the members of CRZ remain very concerned about the scale of the proposed project and the impacts it will have on the quality of life in our surrounding neighborhoods. We ask the Burlington Development and Review Board to take the concerns we have raised about noise, traffic, safety, and infrastructure seriously, and recognize the importance of resolving these issues prior to approving the application and allowing the project to move forward. We ask the board to either deny the permit for this project or continue the review until all of these issues have been addressed and the appropriate conditions are attached to any approval. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Next, we have a call-in. I'm going to guess, well, we have a call-in. I'll refrain from guessing who it is.
Okay, you're muted right now, whoever's calling in. Can you unmute them, Scott?
Yep. So if you're on 802-658-3604, you're up.
If not, Scott, we can go to somebody else. Oh, no, there they are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There you go.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. Sorry, this was new. I never had to do this, unmute myself this way. This is Sharon Busher, and I would like to speak in regards to the two items that you're focused on noise and traffic. I want to tell you that I live on East Avenue, and this is relevant, and was here and helped navigate the baseball games that occur behind and nestled in the neighborhoods on Colchester Avenue and East Avenue. And there was sound and there was traffic and there was noise from the game and from the people coming and going. But there was a willingness also to say, this has benefit. This has benefit to the community. This is something that would work for us. And so in that spirit, I'm offering these comments. I offered some last time, and I did call Scott today, but I wanted to just speak to the real concerns that I know neighbors have. The one regarding noise, and you've got your study and you've got how the insulation of the structure is going to be done. The outdoor plaza was something that I heard neighbors talk about. Now, if there's going to be alcohol served at this outdoor plaza, there is another opportunity for conditions to be imposed. And if indeed the noise became such that it was incompatible with the neighborhood, then that permit, that liquor license could be pulled or suspended. So I think that, this is just a statement to the applicant and to the neighbors that there are a number of different ways that you can get compliance. But ultimately, what I want is success here. So that's number one with noise. Traffic, which does generate noise also, is another thing that we had to deal with. And I read through all the communications and I didn't see between DPW or the applicant any discussion about, yes, you have a large parking lot available for the cars to come and actually access the venue. But in the interim, while there is not the parkway, while the enhancements have not been made, would it be realistic to contemplate parking some of those cars off-site and busing in those attendees? One, you'll deal with some of the compression that you're hearing about over and over again, and the fact that some numbers may not be right. Number two is when you have fewer people in the parking lot, there'll be less noise, less doors shutting, and less of the issues regarding the ways out of that venue. I was a city councilor and I did get involved in the rezoning of this site. And so it's not like I hadn't gone there and looked at the restrictions and some of the complications around access to the site. And yet an industrial park is not viable really anymore in most communities. And so we have to be creative to make it work for our community and for the businesses that are there now. So I'm supportive of this, and I offer my insights as hoping that they will help address some of the hard questions that have to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Scott?
We have Frank Kochman up next. We already have Frank's address.
Frank, I think you're an attorney for the CRZ group. Is that true? Frank is muted at the moment.
Frank, you're up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
And I am, just for everybody to know, I am running a 3-minute timer, which is what we've talked about in the past. So go ahead.
I'm wondering, the way I had talked about this, the designated representative for the group is Laurie Smith, and the way he had talked about this, if his hand is up, I assume it is, I prefer that he go first, if that's possible. Do you mind?
I don't see Laurie's hand up. Well, it just went up. I see Emily Ryan and Laurie Smith.
Okay, we are, we are trying to keep this somewhat focused. Laurie, are you there?
Okay, Laurie, you should be able to talk.
There now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, thank you, Frank. And I just wanted to say that I really hope you guys read the letter that Frank sent in yesterday.
You have it, and I assume we'll all read it. Thank you.
Okay, that's fabulous. I just want to point out that the ambient noise levels at night in this area typically are in the low 30 decibel range. So if you have 42 decibels or 44 or 45 decibels at Arthur Court, it is going to be way above plainly audible. And the noise ordinance is at the property line, not at some adjacent property. So I really hope you guys look at what the noise ordinance is, and it's directly applicable to parties, and this is a big party that's going to be happening here. I also want to say that I or any one of my neighbors, when we are coming home at 1 o'clock in the morning, which actually I'm asleep, but many people aren't, and we come across 250 people trying to get across the 1-lane bridge, it's going to be pretty tricky trying to get back to my neighborhood, or for any of my neighbors that live in the neighborhood, which is several hundred people. So the noise ordinance is very pertinent, and the people who live up and around the college, which is where I used to live, up around the university, had this noise ordinance put in place specifically because their quality of life was degraded to the point where people wanted to leave the neighborhoods. And the noise ordinance, plainly audible, is designed to make sure that at night, the level of noise above the ambient noise level is not inappropriate. And 45 decibels is a great WHO number, but if it's related to background noise, that's what you have to consider. And that's why we are asking for real focus on what this noise ordinance is. And I will stop there and thank you guys so much for bearing with such a long process. Good luck.
Thank you, Laurie. So Frank, is that, are you wanting to be next?
Yes, I'll go now. There's two things that I want to talk about within the time that you'll allow me. One is pleading with you to allow our sound expert, for you to ask the applicant to provide the raw data that we've asked for several times to our sound experts. Your reliance, well, that's one thing I want to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about is the noise ordinance, but one thing at a time.
We do have your memo on the noise ordinance, Frank.
I know you do, but I want to respond to Brian.
Okay.
What Brian has said is you guys shouldn't, you don't have to pay any attention. Don't litigate the noise ordinance. I'm not asking you to litigate the noise ordinance. What I am saying, however, is that criterion 6 requires you to make an affirmative finding that there's no undue adverse impact under any other city regulation or ordinance or state law that applies. And we've raised for you, I think, quite credibly, a city ordinance that applies. There's a difference between litigating the noise ordinance and trying to make a decision without taking it into account. You have available to you the city legal department. Some of you at least can make your own judgment about the applicability of the noise ordinance. I ask that you look at that seriously and would suggest to you that you're really obliged to, under criterion 6, you got to make a judgment about the applicability of the noise ordinance. And then whether or not there has been, you're satisfied that there is compliance with it. I also want to take mild exception to having my argument without getting into the argument unless somebody has a question, called, what was the word, creative? Yeah, well, that's, we all know that's the kiss of death. It's very creative, very ingenious, motion denied. I don't think it's that. I think it's very transparent and very straightforward for those of you who care to cope with it. Some of the remarks made about compliance, even though they claim it doesn't apply, Mr. Duncan in particular, attempted to show how, in fact, the project complies. There were a couple of things he said that require comment. First of all, as to the purpose of the noise ordinance, he left out the word peace of others. He just skipped over it. It appears twice in the ordinance. I'll read it to you. The purpose of this section is to preserve the public health, safety, and welfare by prohibiting excessive and disturbing noise and to prevent noise which is prolonged or unsuitable for the time and place. He got that far correctly. Then he skipped, which is detrimental to the peace and good order of the community. Then section B1 says, noise shall be deemed to be unreasonable when it disturbs, injures, or endangers the peace of another. So that's a real consideration. If you're driving the people next door or the people 100 yards away nuts every night, you're violating the noise ordinance. Interestingly, on the applicability section, in the original noise assessment, it's right up front. One of the applicable standards that's put forward by Mr. Duncan in the noise assessment is the noise ordinance. He skips a couple of sections of it, but nevertheless he does. Secondly, as to the noise ordinance, Brian tried to raise the issue that, gee, B2A only refers to music. Well, this ties into providing us with the raw data. Mr. Tochi, whose credentials are every bit as sound and as extensive as Mr. Duncan's, has criticized the noise report for, among other things, reporting 88 decibels for 15 loud male voices when, according to Mr. Tochi, the correct number is 97. I don't expect you to resolve that dispute. I pointed out as an example of why we ought to be entitled, I hope you'll see it this way, we ought to be entitled to review the same data that was available to him with the experts that we have, and that your complete reliance is misplaced. I don't want to go on at length. I see something less than, rapt enchantment on some faces. I will answer questions. If anyone has any curiosity about what has been raised, I'd be happy to address it in greater depth. I spent a lot of time on both. I sent you 2 letters. One was why we should get the raw data. The second was on the noise ordinance. I refer you to those things in detail. If they've raised anybody's interest, I'm here.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Cochran at this point? I appreciate it. I think we're going to be moving on to, do we have other members of the public? Scott?
Yeah, we have 3 more, Brad. Emily Ryan is up next.
How many, can you tell how many?
3 including Emily.
Okay. Emily, you're on.
Yes, this is obviously not Emily. This is Robert Ziesing. I live with Emily. And I live, you can hear me?
Yeah, but where do you live?
Oh, I was going to say Ledgewood, which is right off Austin Drive.
What number on Ledgewood? This is for notification purposes.
80 Austin Drive.
80, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm a musician and an audio engineer, and I've played at Higher Ground. So I love music and all that, but I'm concerned. I know how music travels at night, and the Burlington noise ordinance clearly states you're not supposed to be disturbed by music after 10 p.m. And the bass frequencies in particular will travel through walls and travel like crazy. What if Higher Ground only played music until 10 p.m., there would be no objections, and maybe there'd be objections about traffic, but it's very unfair to the residents of this very quiet neighborhood, and the neighborhood is very quiet, I can tell you. It's unfair for the residents to have to hear music after 10 p.m. It just is. Imagine if you were in your home and every night you hear a party that goes till 1 or 2 a.m. You wouldn't like it. So what I would urge the board to do is to put the residents first in this. I support businesses, and as I say, I'm a musician. I played at Higher Ground. You know, it's a great place, but it's more important that the residents who live here and can't move are not harassed by music after 10 p.m. And I would like to know if there should be a way, if Higher Ground is disturbing people, for their permit to be pulled, or they're forced to just go till 10 p.m. or whatever. So this is feedback from a person who lives in the area. I'm a musician, as I said, an audio engineer. Just wanted to have you guys consider that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scott?
Okay, it looks like we have Judy next.
Judy, if you can introduce yourself and say where you live. And there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to use my work computer because my personal computer kind of died about an hour ago. So I'm not Judy. My name is Almy Landauer.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And live where?
Yes, I live at 161 Austin Drive, number 139. It's in the Red Rocks condos in Burlington.
Thank you.
And I would like to talk a little bit more about the traffic situation. I think it's pretty obvious and well known that when people are in their cars and they're faced with a traffic backup, that they will seek alternate routes. And so when Home Avenue and Pine and Home Avenue and Route 7 are backed up because of 300 cars leaving at the same time, people are going to, it's just human nature, they're going to seek other roads. They're going to go through South Crest neighborhood to get to Flynn, Ledgewood neighborhood to get to Flynn, Lake Forest to get to Flynn. They're going to cut through on South Crest, on Ferguson, on Batchelder. They're going to cut through on Richardson up further north. They're going to cut through any which way they can, Oak Beach Drive, etc., to get back up to Route 7. So we are talking about potentially impacting a huge portion of the southern part of the south end of Burlington, not quote unquote just the 5 neighborhoods that surround Burton directly and are impacted by the one-lane bridge and Home Avenue and Queen
Ms.
City
Landauer,
Park.
I'm very familiar with how traffic flows here. Please Focus your response on something new.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you. Scott?
We have Stephanie Herrick up next and one more after that.
Okay. Stephanie Herrick?
I'm Stephanie Herrick, and I live at 161 Austin Drive, Unit 151, that's Red Rock. And we've been hearing a lot about the traffic at Pine and Home, but what you also have to look at is once you go up Home to Shelburne Road, there's a light and they'll be backing up behind. And so, and the other place that it will back up is when you go up Queen
Ms.
City.
Herrick, I'm sorry, again.
Too much traffic.
What's new? We know about the traffic flow.
All right. I would also like to say, I think their study about the outdoor lounge had 15 voices, men's voices. And first of all, it's going to be what, a couple hundred people possibly on that outdoor lounge. And they'll be serving drinks, they'll have their cell phones. So there's going to be something more than that in noise. And thank you very much for being as patient as you've been. That's it.
Thank you. And you say there's one more?
It's two more.
Two more.
Well, now there's two more. We have Lori Hayes up.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lori Hayes. I live at 3 Lions Ave in South Burlington. Honestly, after 2 hours of this, it's really hard to think through. I have a lot of compassion for y'all to be listening to kind of the lawyer aspect. I'm a big fan of Higher Ground. I've been to many, many concerts. I love the idea of a potential hub. What I'm really, really worried about is that I'm really afraid that we're going to be the ones left to deal with the problems. I know we talked about those concentric circles of care or of, this is not Williston Road. And so folks are going to come down here to the park and to the beach. And I'm afraid it's going to be left to us to be calling the police or to be calling High Ground or to be, protesting at city council if there's an issue. And I'm just worried that there won't be enough other entities to do that kind of monitoring. And as citizens, we just don't want to do this. We don't want to be fighting with our neighbors and living that kind of way. So I encourage you to pay attention to the enforcement part because signage just doesn't cut it. And if you've ever been to the beach or the park, you know that, the dog walking signs are never enforced. So thank you for your time. And I hope you can pay attention to that.
Thank you. Scott.
Okay, Diane DeTerra. Diane, you're up.
Just unmute her. Oh, there you go. Oh. I think she's muted, Scott.
I should be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm muted now.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's been a long hearing. I appreciate your adding me to the list. You're looking for something new.
Your address, Diane?
My address is 39 Central Avenue in Queen City Park.
Thank you.
Something new is simply, as I listen carefully, I'm only concerned, I have many concerns, but right now my concern is what I didn't hear. I heard that there may be another need for further reducing noise. There are plans. Should it be necessary, we have a mechanism, but I didn't hear what that mechanism was. There would be a rowdy event, perhaps, and I believe the word that was used was rowdy. There would be a plan. There is a plan. I heard assumptions, I heard hypotheticals, I heard about no simulations for traffic. So I would really be interested to hear about the mechanisms, the plans, should these eventualities occur. That's really it. I'm going to be brief because it's been long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Is that it, Scott?
I see no other hands up.
Okay. And I'm sure the applicant has more to add, but I think that I don't really see that being necessary at this point. I think we've had both sides, the applicant present their information. We had a little bit more information back from the public. Does any of the board has any comments they want to make at this point, I think we will close this public hearing and figure out when we're going to deliberate and determine if we need more information at that point. So public hearing is closed. We have one other agenda item, a DRB bylaw amendment. Right, Scott?
Correct. Quick and easy.
Approved.
I think it's got a little more process than that, but close.
You sure?
No, I'm not.
Scott, you have
I
3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to tell us if
bylaw
you've
to
done.
reflect permitting inspections as opposed to planning and zoning.
Should we bring Jeff back into the meeting?
Oh, that's a good point.
Jeff is here.
See if Jeff is still here.
I will tell you that your phone message refers to planning and zoning.
When was the last time you checked?
A couple of days ago, I thought.
A couple of days ago?
Yeah. It
Well,
was.
that's a problem. It was supposedly resolved maybe a month or two ago.
Oh no, it's definitely within the last month or two.
All right, you're killing me, Brad.
It's David's voice.
Okay.
Okay, so anyways, the proposed bylaw amendments.
Yeah. I don't see Jeff. I'm looking for him.
I see him in the attendees with his hand up.
So the real change is just that Department of Permitting and Inspections. That is really it. Is that true?
We changed the department name and the other item, the 30-second background. So when the bylaws were put together initially, what, I don't know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we put a time limit in there for how long applications could remain pending. We had a couple that were seemingly going on indefinitely. So fast forward 2 or 3 years ago, time limits for deferral were codified in the CDO. So now the bylaw simply refers to that.
Okay. So does somebody want to make a motion to it? We have to adopt these, right, Scott?
Yes.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Second. Who did the so move? Was that Sean? Oh, Jeff. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So it must be 7-0.
Yep.
Approved. So we are adjourned. And we do have 2 items to deliberate. I'm not suggesting we deliberate tonight.
No, God, no.
The question is, when do we want to deliberate? Either try on Monday night, or do we want to try before the next meeting, or what?
Yeah, I can't do next Monday.
Could do before the next meeting.
I could do that too.
Like at 4 o'clock or something?
4 o'clock.
Is that the first?
Isn't it?
September 1st.
It's the day after Labor Day for anybody who's, well, it's not.
No, it's the week before Labor Day.
Oh, okay, so that's September 1st at 4 o'clock?
Sure.
Okay. Well, thanks for the being the enforcer there, AJ.
No problem. I'll yell at anybody for you, Brad.
Thank you. Okay.
Skill set, you know.
I'll say good night to everybody.
Good night.
All right. Good night. Till next time.
Yes.
Night, everyone.